In this unit, we'll be considering the school's role in juvenile delinquency. The schools are an important aspect in the issue of delinquency because the kinds of relationships a youth has at school and the child's commitment to academic success is a strong factor in whether the child is at risk for delinquency. Some research has indicated that it is the third most important factor, with the relationship with the parents and the types of peers that the youth associates with being the two most important factors. Delbert Elliott states that the school is the critical social context for the generation of delinquent behavior. Arthur Stincombe believes that failure in the schools leads to rebelliousness, which then leads to more failure and negative behaviors. Eugene Magwin and Rolf Lober's meta-analysis revealed that children with lower academic performance offend more frequently, commit more serious and violent offenses, and persist in their offending. There's considerable evidence that the school is a place where delinquent behavior is learned. The most recent phenomenon has been the targeting of schools for mass murders, which in turn has led to what's known as zero-tolerance policies. This in turn has led to different solutions, one of which has been to place school resource officers in many schools. Because of the widespread concern and the fact that federal government has been supportive of zero-tolerance policies to ensure the advancement of safe schools, there has been specific federal and state dollars allocated to advancing numerous Safe Schools Acts, enacted mainly by state legislatures. The outcome is that there's less tolerance for not only aggressive acts, but anything that is deemed to remotely constitute a threat, such as a behavior-disordered student making an off-the-cuff remark when they're angry, saying they will bring their daddy's gun to school and blow up the classroom, to filing charges against youth that won't comply with the teacher's directions as being beyond control of school. Thus, you have a wide range of youth that may be charged with offenses at school. Sometimes behaviors are truly threatening, but often they are related to minor threats, or disobedience towards the school staff, or a fight in the school hallway. There are also special statutes to protect school staff. In Kentucky, what's known as abusive teacher, which is a criminal offense that would create delinquency status. This statute includes cursing at the teacher, relatively minor behavior, but it would warrant a trip to juvenile court if charges are brought against the child. There has been criticism that the end effect of all these policies is to replace the principal's office with the courtroom, meaning that what used to be dealt with at the principal's office and might result in detention or suspension now is dealt with in juvenile court. So as an overview of what has been the hot issue for the schools over the last 50 years. In the 1970s, the biggest concern was vandalism, property crime, and violence. The kinds of violence that the schools were concerned with revolved around assaults, fights between students more often than anything else. In the 1980s, there were more serious offenses that seemed to be occurring. First-degree assaults, where there was serious injury to the victim, sometimes rape or even murder, and it appeared that the level of violence was increasing and that the amount of vandalism was escalating. By the 1990s, the United States started seeing a high degree of concern for all children's safety due to the incidence of mass murders and the use of automatic and semi-automatic weapons being brought into the schools. The recognition is that violence has increased in the past 50 years and that the lethality of violence in the schools is at an all-time high. This slide gives you an idea of the main issues of concern over the past 160 years. The policy of mandatory free education was enacted by almost all the northern states by 1850. Schools 100 years ago were not at all like what we see today. In a report by Horace Mann from the 1840s, having observed what occurred in a school that had 250 pupils, Mann reported that there were 328 floggings in the 5-day week of school, that the school averaged over 65 floggings a day. One of the main focuses of the progressive movement at the turn of the century was widespread dissatisfaction of the schools. John Dewey advocated for reform in classroom methods and curricula so that students would become more questioning, more creative, and more involved in the process of their own education. Dewey's focus was on individualism and personal growth, and less on rigid socialization. By 1918, education was both free and compulsory in almost every state in the Union, though the Southern schools were segregated. By 1954, segregation was ruled unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court. This was a pivotal event in American education. It obligated the federal government to make sure that racial segregation was dismantled, and that integration within the schools was achieved within a reasonable time limit. Busing students to create better racial equality within a school district, often to very distant schools, and creating the need for many hours a day on the bus for the student, is still, 60 years later, a hotly debated topic. The baby boom of the 1950s created a swell in student enrollments by the 1960s. Public education became more expensive in the 1970s, due in part to increasing enrollment, as well as the need for more expensive equipment. The use of audiovisual aids was on the rise by then, and in years to come, the purchasing of scientific equipment, and eventually computers, would add to the cost of education. At the same time, teachers' unions were starting to take a firmer stance on contract talk, and some larger cities started experiencing teachers' strikes. A large amount of evidence exists that both male and female delinquency is associated with poor academic performance in school. Research shows that delinquents' lack of achievement in school is related to other factors besides just their academic skills. Studies have shown that delinquents tend more often to reject the student role than do non-delinquents. Delinquents' performance in school may be further affected by their relationship with classmates and teachers. Several studies show that relationships between school performance and delinquency is affected by peer influences. Magwin and Lober's meta-analysis found that children with lower academic performance committed more delinquent acts and had a longer offending history than those that had higher academic performance. Academic performance is a predictor of delinquency independent of socioeconomic status. Children with disabilities or mental health issues also face very unique challenges in the schools. In theory, the Individual with Disabilities in Education Act, the IDEA, a federal law, assists youth with appropriate resources to assist them in their achievement. However, often youth go undiagnosed or for a variety of reasons may not be accessing the appropriate services.